you and
We're live now.
when we begin. We're live. Okay. Welcome to everybody to a Plan C Live program from Make Community. And I'm Dale Doherty, co-hosting with Dorothy Jones Davis of Nation of Makers. Today, our session is about library makerspaces, what they've been doing over the last 3 months, what they are doing right now to reopen, to become functional again, and what the plans are for this summer as we hope making inside of libraries can continue in some form or fashion. We have a number of people here from a variety of libraries throughout the US, and I'm gonna, rather than introduce you individually, we're gonna throw it to and allow them to introduce themselves and tell us a bit about what they've been doing the last 90 to 100 days, whether the library was closed or open, and some of the PPE production that's been happening in our communities, and what the state of the makerspace is. So I'm going to start with V. Hoff from the Octavia Lab in the downtown Los Angeles Public Library. Welcome, V.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. I run the Octavia Lab, which is named after Octavia Butler. A little bit of what we've been up to, very briefly. The day we closed, we were contacted by a doctor who said, hey, why don't you guys make PPE? I initially said no, because we're closed. The mayor's office mayor's office emailed us saying, hey, we had this great idea. Why don't you guys make PPE? In that they also CC'd 2 other makerspaces that have ties to the city. And in it was LACI, Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator. They have a wonderful makerspace called the Advanced Prototyping Center. And we partnered with them, and they helped us with the prototyping, with doing a face shield model. We did a variant of the Nexus, the Prux. Oh man, I've been talking about this for so long. The Prusa face shield, but we did the Maker Nexus model with the actual the plastic covering on the top, and we got hospital approval from multiple hospitals. At this point, we've given to 8 different hospitals, all in the area, and doing about 1,700. We're still continuing making face shields. We just started curbside pickup this week, and we're in the process of figuring out how to reopen. I think that's the briefest answer I can give you guys.
No, that's great. And what does your makerspace look like, and is it in the main building?
I like to tell the story the sexiest way possible. So Octavia Butler's favorite space in the entire building was the science department. She was a science fiction writer. So where is the makerspace going to be? Science department. So we're in the basement. So the building is built like Dewey Decimal style. Each floor is a Dewey Decimal kind of decade. And we are in the science department. They carved out space for us there. And we are roughly 3,000 square feet. We have 2 3D printers normally, laser cutter, a sound booth, kind of editing room, Adobe Creative Cloud licenses. We also have a digitization station for videos, home movies, that kind of stuff. This is the age of Corona, as we like to call it, and we make all hustles possible. So in the process of doing PPE, I reached out to Glendale Public Library and borrowed all of their 3D printers, and all the 3D printers that was within the size of the face shield. And we have a total of 12 3D printers running right now, making face frames. So it's been interesting going to light manufacturing.
Okay, fantastic. Adam St. Pierre, you are joining us from Baton Rouge. Is that the Baton Rouge Public Library?
Yeah, it's the East Baton Rouge Parish Public Library.
Okay.
Because we have parishes and not counties.
That's right. So tell us about what you've been doing at the library.
Yeah. In East Baton Rouge Parish, we've got a satellite space, small location, but we are in a somewhat unique spot where we're supposed to be opening our flagship. So we closed in mid-March, then we reopened to essential personnel only, which was myself, my one guy, and our deputy director Kristen, to start making PPE. And I don't know, I think we made about 700 pieces on some of our printers and on our laser cutter, and just giving them out to hospitals. We teamed up with a local group of modelers and all sorts of folks in the small tech circles that are here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but to make an actual face shield model. And yeah, we are open right now. We're at 25% capacity, or we're allowed to have 25% capacity. We're not making PPE anymore, and we're more focused on bringing our flagship space into existence, and planning our first virtual maker fair too. So that'll be fun.
Okay, great. Thank you, Adam. Amelia Vanderheide, can you tell us about yourself and your library?
Sure. I'm Amelia Vanderheide. I'm the supervising librarian at the John F. Kennedy Library in Vallejo, which is part of Solano County. We have the Makery, which is we converted the computer center about 1.5 years ago now into a makerspace. So we were close to the public from about March 23rd to June 15th. And during that time, we were making PPE face shields for City of Vallejo workers who are working in hotels with unhoused individuals. So in California, the governor here had a mandate to convert hotels that weren't being used into shelters for unhoused people. And so that's who we're making the PPE for. We had 2 3D printers running. I think we made about 100 or so. And then we also were sewing masks with our 3 sewing machines. So staff were working on that. So I think over the course of about 1.5 months, we sewed enough face masks for staff. And then we also sewed about another extra 100 that we have in reserve in case, because now there's a state mandate for face coverings in California. And we just reopened to the public on June 15th, but right now we're appointment only. So it's very small. It's about 10 people an hour. I don't believe we'll be able to reopen the Makery until the next phase of our reopening plan from County Council, which I have no idea what the timeline is on that because it has to do with infection rates.
Yeah.
But as we move forward, then we'll be, figuring that out, and it probably will go back to program-based when we reopen, whenever that is, instead of free making hours.
Okay, thank you, Amelia. Welcome to Ashley Kaziaka, if I said that right, from Denver Public Library. Hi, Ashley.
Hi. So yeah, I'm Ashley. I am normally the program coordinator for the Central Library's Idea Lab, which is what Denver Public Library is branding all of our makerspaces. So I am one of 6. All of our staff are working from home if they can. We recently transitioned to opening up our book drops with the idea that we will move towards curbside pickup. The tentative date for that is July 7. As far as maker stuff goes, we worked with a statewide group called Make for COVID that was doing medical grade face shields mostly, some masks and other items that hospital staff wanted. So all of our printers were going towards that. And then I managed remotely a staff of 40 people throughout the library who, for whatever reason, couldn't do their normal job. And we are just sewing up masks still. I think at this point we're close to 3,000 masks that we've made. And then I was trying to do math on a spreadsheet before here to figure out how many face shields we had made too. And then we're planning for when we reopen, but we're working with the county to try and figure out what that will look like and when that will be still.
Thank you, Ashley. I want to welcome Jeremiah Walter and Rebecca Cruz, who are both from Colorado Springs, to say in the same state as Ashley. And tell us a bit about the library Makerspaces in Colorado Springs.
I could start with just sort of an overview of the library in general, and then
Yeah.
Becca, being head of our creative services, can dig into the Makerspaces a bit. So we had to close our 15 libraries and our 3 mobile libraries on March 16th. But within about a week and a half, our family and children's services were doing some virtual story times and things like that, live streamed on Facebook, and they could also be viewed later. And soon thereafter, we were adding other virtual programming. We had yoga, book clubs. We have something called Cat Cafe, where you can bring your cat and socialize with other pet owners. And that virtual programming has been very popular. And no surprise, we also saw a huge increase in our ebooks, our e-audiobooks, e-movies, other digital resources. We also have online library card signups, and of course have quite a few more patrons using our resources through that. And we're hopeful that they will stay on as card holders now that they've seen all that libraries have to offer. And Becca will talk a little bit about how we contributed in the community in general, but I wanted to mention a couple other things. Our community partners borrowed laptops and hotspots so residents could apply for unemployment and other benefits and search for jobs. We partnered with school districts and local businesses to provide free reading material at some locations where they give out free meals. One of our libraries was a donation site to collect common household items that were needed by individuals in that area. And now we're going through our phased reopening. So we're currently in curbside. We were closed for about 3 months prior to opening our book drops. So had a huge inundation there. We're quarantining all our materials for 72 hours. So curbside's going great. And now we're preparing for our phase 3, where we're gonna let a limited number of folks into our buildings. And we're ready to go on that. We just need essentially clearance from the governor's office to allow us to do that. But we've got a lot of safety precautions in place there. And then each phase will incrementally, be able to allow more folks into our libraries.
Okay, Rebecca?
Yeah, so I'm Becca Cruz. I'm the Director of Creative Services at the Pikes Peak Library District, which is our makerspaces and studios. Early on, we didn't have staff that were able to do 3D printing and things at home, but we still wanted our machines to be put to good use. So we worked with our local membership makerspaces and Make for COVID, just like Ashley, to find makers in our community who could take our TAS 6s and work on face shield production with those. And they really killed it with what they were able to do. So we were really excited, and we got a couple back before. And once staff were allowed back into the buildings, we started fabricating ear savers. So we did a lot of those for Make for COVID. And then also we've been able to make them for staff, which I think is going to make a huge difference with the several hours of wearing a mask while serving patrons, and just hopefully give everybody a happier bit of moments when they're helping patrons with those masks behind their ears all the time. We also worked on sewing face masks. We had ordered a whole bunch because everyone's required to wear them while they're working, and got notification that they weren't going to show up on time when we were originally thinking we'd be reopening for curbside. And we just said, okay, well, we'll work on making them. And we had assembly teams in-house where people came in, and we had people prepping fabric. We used the laser cutter to cut the fabric. We had people sewing the fabric. And then we also had people who wanted to sew from home, so we could send them packets of pre-cut patterns and they could just sew away and send them back. And we've been sending those out to staff. And even though the other masks did show up, thankfully, it's just not one size fits all with these, as I'm sure everybody has seen. And so we've been able to make lots of different sizes, including some for staff children and people who have bigger faces and needed larges. And we've really gotten amazing feedback for that. So the creative spaces aren't until phase 4, so we're still a ways off, but we're now with PPE production winding down, working hard on getting our procedures in place for reopening those spaces to the public and pivoting to offer virtual programs while also trying to figure out how we can still support people with Maker Center learning who may not have reliable internet at home, so may not be able to get to those virtual programs as easily as some of the other people. So that's one of our big things that we're thinking about right now.
Okay, great. Jeff Stratter, can you tell us about yourself and your library makerspace?
Sure. I think in the beginning, it helps to set some context of where our lives were pretty far and remote from everybody. We're 2.5 hours away from any major city or interstate. So that puts us in a pocket of the world that hasn't really experienced COVID maybe the way that everybody else has, but that doesn't mean that we're not taking it seriously and the same precautions that everybody else is doing. We did start PPE production pretty early on, just to kind of rally around our community and make sure it's sufficiently supplied, because we're kind of going to be at the low end of the totem pole in terms of communities that would actually receive anything if it goes. So my kitchen table, along like others, turned into a factory, and my wife is probably happy now that that is no longer the case because we've slowed down PPE production there. It was really great to see actually our local community of makers come out, because we have a lot of traditional makers within our community. I think we had over 100 or so people sewing, and we made over 3,000 to 5,000 masks, I think, for our community. So it's been pretty impressive, and gowns and anything else that was needed. And they would always just leave masks out for anybody to pick up at any point in time in the community, which was really helpful. We teamed up with our statewide effort, Idaho Makers Unite, which was really cool because they were had an online forum for people in need to match with makerspaces all around the state, and they would ship stuff all around the state. So that was, another great effort there. In terms of being opened, we're pretty far, and we're just surrounded by a barricade of shower curtains right now. But other than that, people are pretty much free to move about our library. In terms of making and what that looks like potentially for our summer, is we're starting to concentrate on summer reading, and we're doing a lot of kind of take-home maker kits that we're putting together right now. So as somebody alluded to, as far as the accessibility issue and internet, trying to make some of those for people to pick up and take home and do those, as well as we're really focused on maker education in our space. And how does a MAD look for people? Can we go in person? Can we host conferences, teach maker education? And how do we work with our local schools and partners to prepare them? How do you do making at a physical distance of 6 feet? What does that look like? Working with our schools heavily of preparing the teachers for that next phase, which inevitably will probably be the fall, what it will look like.
Okay, Jeff, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Martin Villegas, Corona, California Library.
Yes, the unfortunately named city of Corona. So I'm a library
This is where it all
specialist.
came from, right?
Right now. Hope not. So I'm a library specialist at the Corona Public Library. And like many, we were shut down when the governor announced the stay-at-home order. And then kind of to counter the previous, participant, we're actually in between two fairly major cities in SoCal. So we basically follow their lead in terms of when to shut down or how. But our staff was reassigned pretty quickly from the library. Specifically, all of our maker team got put on a call center. And so we were in charge of kind of getting the information out to people who needed it. Some staff at the library was in charge of helping out our local kind of senior care facilities, long-term care facilities, which they've done a fantastic job. And then apart from that, at the outset, our EOC approached us, the Emergency Operations Center. They approached us with, can we help make PPE? And at the time, we only had one of the TAS 3D printers, the TAS Mini, that was functional. And so they said, you know what, we'll take it. So we put together a little flash drive for them with the file already loaded on it. We created a guide for the EOC to follow to be able to print the ear savers. And then they distributed those out to police, fire, and whoever asked for them. And then apart from that, they actually ordered a separate 3D printer. I think it's called a Quibi X Max or something like that. Cheedy Tech or something like that. And so that now is housed back inside of our makerspace, which at this point is not open yet. And so we have, I think it was 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, staff was allowed back in the building. But our administration has been doing a pretty good job of trying to plan and schedule out based on comfort level. So we have some periodic surveys where, if staff isn't comfortable, face-to-face interaction with patrons, then they don't have to go out to our summer reading program booth. Because that's the point we're at now, is the curbside. So in terms of makerspace, we are printing ear savers for staff. We'll probably expand that at some point, depending on when or if we open anytime soon. But for now, the curbside service has been rolled out, and we also have our maker programming that's a part of that. And so thankfully, we were able to have staff be at the booth to give out activity handouts that we've created. And so we try to, make it as fun as possible. We also included video kind of guides for some of those activities. And so our second one actually just got completed today. So good job, staff, for getting that out. And then apart from that, regardless if they have internet access or not, they can pick up the activity handouts and the maker kits that we're putting together at the booth. And so it's kind of a one-stop shop for all of our summer programming. Because at this point, again, we're not sure when we can reopen. We know that California has kind of given the green light, but again, our county, we found out, is actually the 10th most populous county in the country. So there's a lot of layers to it. And apart from that, we're just trying to get the programming out to them virtually, and then basically coupling that with the rest of our programming, just doing as much as we can for our community.
Thank you, Martin. Last but not least, certainly, Sasha Neri from Howard Washington Public Library in Chicago. Welcome, Sasha.
Hi. Yeah, so we were closed around March 22nd, and we reopened to the public on June 7th. And then during that time that we were closed, I was working on a few different projects with Illinois PPE to get our makers in the staff, and then makers that were reaching out to us to get stuff made. So we're still doing a lot of that. Still, it's amazing how many masks are still needed. I also worked at an emergency dispatch call center that a bunch of the library staff were tapped to help. I used to work in what we call the information center, so I'm very used to just answering that phone and talking to people. And then, we spent a lot of time creating guidelines for virtual programs. We have about 80 locations, and so they're all kind of ready to go to connect with their communities virtually. So we wanted to make sure they've got a good start for that. And then, of course, our administration had to adapt our normal procedures for reopening. So it's things like, removing computers from the space so that they're spaced properly. The signage everywhere and greeters reminding people, oh, you don't have a mask, here's a mask, or here's some hand sanitizer. I work in the central library, so it's huge. And people can only access a small part of it right now. And then as for our makerspace, our space is about 600 square feet. It's not very big, so we're definitely thinking about an appointment-based approach. It was super helpful for the Octavia Lab to share out their documentation forever ago, because it's solid, it's so helpful. And I feel like there's just a lot of good stuff there. But yeah, we've been busy despite, this whole working from home. It didn't feel like a vacation at all.
Yeah. I think, V, do you have a link to that? If you could put it in the chat or anything to that.
Sure. I actually have what Sasha's referring to is the first document, which was how we started making PPE. We now have a second document where we're trying to figure out how to reopen. I'll put both those links in there.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Dorothy?
Yeah, no. So I think the first question that I'm interested in. So when I think of libraries, I think of the fact that they're widely open. They're a way to allow individuals from all different backgrounds to have access to knowledge. And certainly in the cases of the makerspaces that you guys run in your spaces, they're a way for us to get, sort of democratize access to tools and technology. And so I know each of you have spoken a little bit about it, but I'm curious, how, if anyone wants to speak to, how you are sort of wrangling the equity issues, right? So I think when the library closes down or is unable to produce or provide the resources in the way that it normally does, I think some of you have talked about, the ways that it's been more challenging in your communities to perhaps get those resources to people. And some of you had, some innovative ways that you're creating. I know a lot of you talked about, for example, the kits and things that you're making. But I also, I'm just curious, I think there was some talk about the online, how some of the individuals that are, I think, Becca, you were talking about, online, you have all these different sort of sessions that you're providing, but then just making sure that you guys have access to those sessions, that individuals that are trying to reach those tools are able to. I'm hoping I'm making sense. Sorry, it's getting late here, so.
Ashley, go ahead. Yeah, you could just jump in.
I was like, just checking. There's enough of us that I'm like,
that's good. That.
So the library as a whole has been doing a ton of virtual programming, and we're just sort of dipping our toes in and doing virtual maker stuff. But our biggest concern has been we have a lot of users who don't normally have internet access. So we've been working with our mobile services. So what historically was called the Bookmobile. They've been going to some summer meal sites and going to emergency shelters and other places. And so what we've done is created little one-page how-to guides where one side is English and the other side is Spanish, and have directions for a project that people can do with recycled materials or things that they already have at home. And that's what we're trying to do with some of the video content that we're creating, is being really mindful of things that people already have, so that they don't have to leave their houses, they don't have to spend any money. And we're working with our summer programming team to make kits that have craft supplies, and also our internal name for this is our Maker Equity Kits. They will get a sexier name when they go out to the public. But they have the basic stuff that you would need. So like scissors and glue and tape and all those things that would enable you to be able to make cool stuff at home that you don't want to admit that maybe you don't have, but we're just going to give those out and leverage a lot of those same sites that we're already visiting alongside curbside pickup.
That's perfect, because I was just having a conversation with someone who admitted that I think they started out sort of doing work around kits, and they were like, okay, and everyone has tape, and somebody in the staff was like, no, everyone doesn't have tape. And I think the person that was running the program was like, wait, and I think it was sort of like they were thinking really around the technology, like not everyone has a 3D printer. Okay, not everybody has internet, but everyone has tape. And it's like, no, that's not necessarily the case. And so I really like the way that you've sort of melded sort of the basic kit, right? To get us all to sort of the level place. And then there's all these other really cool things that are very unique to our surrounding, right? So someone may have something that they make that's completely different than someone else. And that's actually kind of the fun of making, right? Is some of the new and different stuff that you can make and share. So I really, really like that as an idea of something to do. Is anyone else doing anything else like sort of along that vein? I'm trying to get ideas.
Martin? Yeah, Martin.
Yeah, so when we were tasked with creating virtual maker activities, one of the first things that me and my coworker did was just go around our places, our apartment or house, and see what we had available. And our focus from the start has been on supplies. Even if you don't get a maker kit, even if you can't drive to the library, if you do have internet access or you do spot this activity online, you can still participate. And so right here, I do have this little guitar is made with a cardboard box and rubber bands and pencils, and that's it. And it plays pretty well. And then we also have our sale card, which was our week 2 activity, but it's just a cup, an index card, and some cardboard. And it's very simple things that are very not only engaging, but also interactive. There's layers to it, so you can make it more difficult, you can customize it, or you can even make it more simple if you needed to, depending on what you had on hand. And so our focus from the start was to provide the handouts for those that didn't have internet access, to provide the videos for those that did, but no matter what, somebody can participate with what they have on hand, which hopefully includes, things like tape and scissors, but improvising is definitely something we try to imbue in our activities there.
Great. Adam, did you have something to add?
Yeah, it was just we're also doing kits, and kind of like what he was just saying about just anything that you have around the house. We've got different kits. Like one I've got here is just like a little potion thing with glue, and we started using like Q-tips for like painting and stuff to just give out, because it's just, I don't know, it's easier to give out. But yeah, we haven't really started to do virtual stuff, that much virtual stuff yet, mostly just grab and go.
That's awesome. Chris Kayuk from our audience asked, how are you distributing the kits, that they're struggling with giving out the kits, but also ensuring equity and distribution? And I think this is like a real issue, even as I talk to educators, right? They have a similar sort of situation where you want to make sure that there's equity and distribution, that everybody that needs the kits and things, the supplies, gets them. So does anyone have any suggestions? It sounds like Sasha, you put something in. Do you want to just say it just in case someone's not reading the chat?
Yeah, I think, our libraries have very strong community connections to our other partner organizations. And a lot of them, some of them had to shut their doors for a little bit, but a lot of them went into overdrive and helped people access a lot of other things. So definitely tapping into those connections you already have. Everyone wants to help out, so they'll have the information for you.
Yeah. Amelia, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, so actually, I just read what Pam wrote in the chat, but I was going to suggest that in California, we do free lunch at the libraries. And so we've been doing distribution of kits for the free lunch programs. My school district in Vallejo, though, they didn't use us as a host site this year, but we've been doing it other places in the county for the kits. And with the kits, we've tried to at minimum not put anything in that would need like extra supplies, because we were trying to think of things that people could just do very hands-on and quickly. So yeah, free lunch has been a good way to do that. And then just, anyone that does come to visit the library being like, do you know a kid at home? Here's a kit. Like, and just sending them on their way that way.
So Jeff, you are also using free lunch programs to distribute kits?
They're hosting at our site, but we're also going to send them when they go around the community at the other sites as well. So we'll just give them kits to hand out, that pick up a lunch and pick up a kit as well. So we'll be able to hit more students and youth in our community that way.
Okay, great. Someone asked a little bit earlier, how do you get feedback from the community during COVID? Are you using social media, or have you sent out surveys, or have you talked to people by phone? Some of you who are doing information center work, so you may have heard directly from people. Any comments on how you're, I guess, creating a feedback loop? Jeremiah?
At least at Pikes Peak Library District, we already had a pretty robust social media presence, but that seems like it's been even more active now. I don't think we're posting more per se, but I think people with maybe more times on their hands are, being a lot more engaged with our posts, and we've certainly got a lot of feedback on that, in particular too, with things related to, say, our phased reopening and things. A lot of good feedback that way. We do have some mobile libraries, including some that serve assisted living facilities, and prior to resuming that service, I know that staff was doing a lot of phone calls and things like that, because of course a lot of those folks might not be either as computer savvy or on social media. So those are a couple of ways that we've been getting feedback from our patrons.
Okay. And anybody, Peg Kelly asked, how many kits do you make? I mean, how we talk about PPE production. Maybe we could start quantifying kit production of it here inside of libraries. Ashley, were you going to say something?
I was ready to type, and then I was like, oh, I'll just talk. So our goal is to make several thousand.
Wow.
It's basically going to be a how many can we afford game.
Yeah.
And because our plan right now is that the majority of our in-person summer programs are not going to happen, we worked with the team, the youth services team that manages summer programs, and basically partnered up and are using their budget to basically turn it into kit money. So it's just kind of been an algebra problem.
Yeah.
I don't know what the final number will be, but I hope a lot.
Anybody else have a number for the amount of kits you're producing? Okay. I'll just say it's some. But you brought this up, Ashley, a little bit, but I think one of the big issues is, well, in some ways we hear about schools. We haven't heard about all the informal learning opportunities that have really gone away and are probably going to be missing this summer for children and, obviously for parents. How are you in thinking about that? We're going to have, we've had museums closed, we have Boys and Girls Clubs closed, we have all, science centers, and I'm hopeful that libraries can find ways to fill some of that, but it's a huge gap. It's a huge gap to fill. Anyone?
I mean, it's an inequitable answer, but a lot of us are doing virtual programming. That's pretty much like whether it's Instagram stories, so we can be able to reach out with kids in a safe manner, or it's Zoom, or if it's Facebook Live or YouTube Live, or in some of our programming, we're using Twitch. It's imperfect. It's definitely in a place as economically diverse as Los Angeles. We're definitely leaving some folks behind, but we're unable to come up with, a better solution at this point in time. I mean, kits can only do so much.
Okay. It's a good, honest answer.
And I'll follow up
Jeremiah?
too, even because we're looking to let some folks back into our libraries, and that's going to be tough too, because for kids, especially during the summer, but year round, that's their place to hang out, and our spaces aren't going to be conducive for hanging out. We're going to have half the computers available to encourage social distancing and things. So for a lot of staff, that's going to be tough to say, hey, we missed you too, but essentially you have to kind of come and go. And I don't think sadly there's not a perfect answer. It's kind of tough, and just making the best we can of a difficult situation.
Do you also have programming aimed at parents to help them through this period? I see some nodding. Anyone want to weigh in on that? What you're doing? Just go.
Just some of our virtual stuff,
Go.
like even just like book clubs that used to be in person, we're doing those virtually. So a lot of the stuff that was our in-person programs have migrated that direction. I talked about that cat cafe. We also have Yappy Hour for dog owners. So so a lot of virtual stuff for them. One thing that's been helpful for parents too, and we're learning this with our virtual programming, that there was maybe a bigger need than we realized, and this has been one of the silver linings, is that it used to be for a story time you'd have to bring your kid into the library at 10:30 a.m. or whatever, but now because it's pre-recorded and parents can sit their kids down after dinner or something like that at 7 p.m. So even sort of kid-centric programming has been helpful in allowing parents to have a more flexible schedule and access that. So even when we return to our whatever new normal, as it were, a lot of these type of things, perhaps even curbside, because it's convenient for folks, will remain sort of indefinitely.
Okay. As a question came in here, we already got a few answers from the active panelists that we have here. With partial reopening, are there time limits on how long people can spend on the devices or using services? Jeff, you responded and said, computers were limited to 30-minute sessions and we're moving to 1-hour sessions. And Amelia, you said people are limited to 1 hour per day in the library for services. Is that in a sense like partitioning the library time-wise happening is how most of you are thinking about it?
Yeah, it's challenging. People like to, people come to hang out, and we're kind of forced to say, you can't do that. Like our computer space at the Central Library in Chicago normally has 130 computers for people to use throughout the day. And we've had to bring that down to 30 right now just to make sure, to kind of enforce that safety on people who maybe wouldn't mind if someone was next to them. But we know that that's not what's needed right now.
Right.
I would add in as well, we have about 90% of our chairs are upstairs, and the upstairs is shut down. So there is just nowhere to sit in the library to kind of force people to come in, get your things in, move along.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the same thing for us. Most of our furniture's put away. The thing we've noticed the most with being reopened too is that you just don't get the foot traffic. Like we do get people wanting to come in, but it's very different how people are using the library even when they're inside the library versus from before we were shut down.
Has that changed staffing at all?
Yes.
Okay.
Staff is at least in my library, staff is, we also, all of our aides that usually do the shelving and all the processing, they aren't back because they're all non-union workers, so they are still not back. So reference and circulation is doing everything. So my staff is completely task-based now. So they have a task schedule all day. Like they know exactly what they're doing all hours of the day. It's been a big adjustment, especially for reference, to have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, has the culture of the
Yeah,
spaces, I mean, I'm curious the culture change, right? Because I think you're used to having a lot more people coming through and engaging. And then I'm also sort of embedded in there thinking about people whose livelihood depends on access to some of the tools, right? Who may not normally be able to afford the tools and equipment that you are able to provide. And even the time limits that you've had, they've been able to figure out a way to sort of make their livelihood through that, even with the time limits. And I'm curious, has that changed? And have you seen sort of a transition? Are there people that you normally usually see that you don't see anymore? And do you have any stories about kind of where they're at and, how they're sort of coping?
So something just for us that we were able to fortunate to do was we did have people without access to computers when we knew we were going to they wouldn't have access to computers. So we just gave them Chromebooks and just said, bring them back whenever you can. And, we kept our Wi-Fi on 24/7, and we got a lot of nice thank you letters as we're reopening that people dropped those off. But they were able to continue online schooling or make a living doing whatever they do online, but they just didn't have that access.
That is awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. A question comes in, says, there it goes, where'd it go? Some libraries that are closed, such as San Francisco, have librarians doing contact tracing for the Department of Health. Are any of you or your colleagues doing that? Ashley, do you want to?
Oh, yeah, I'm not, but we have people that work in the library that are. So I was just like, yes, check.
Yeah, okay.
We are, sorry.
Go on, V.
We are, as our city librarian would say, we are the #1 staffers of the entire DSW. So he's very, very proud of us. So we've been doing contact tracing. Previously to that, we were doing senior meal services. We run 2 trailer sites. So we have been very, very friendly and very, very helpful during this time period.
Yeah. I don't know exactly how to ask this question, but has COVID-19 maybe changed perceptions of the library in the community? In one way that it's closed, but all the librarians are doing something, whether it's PPE or contact tracing or virtual making. The reason I said it's a difficult question because sometimes people question, why do we need libraries in this day? And as I mentioned, I was, often people don't know the number of services that run through the library. So, if anybody would like to talk about that, I'd appreciate it.
I want to throw in the fact that there are many people I know, I shouldn't say many, but there are people who, when they come home from work, they don't want to be on a computer and they don't have the internet, and that's a choice. So, I mean, for some people it's a choice, some people it's not, but this whole balance of like what's essential, what's not, how do you categorize that? Like, it's very messy and tangled, and it's an internal battle for us too, because we want to be there helping and doing whatever we can, getting you the information, walking you through whatever you need to do. But our hands are tied and we must yell from a distance and hope the message lands.
The Los Angeles Public Library had 1 million checkouts of e-media in April. So it's probably just gone up, up, and up. So it's pretty much, people love it. Yes, they don't like it to be on the screen, but having that kind of robust e-media collection that we've had, we've been very proud about building about, has been something that Angelinos have been very, very grateful and thankful for.
There's a question I actually have, and I'm curious. It's kind of a little out there and in a way. So, one thing that, I noticed, and this might be for more of the larger cities, libraries, again, are thought of, as resources for so many different things. And, just exactly what we were just talking about, all the other sort of services that they provide, but they often actually also act as a safe haven. And actually, I know there's some controversy around safe havens for example, homeless individuals or people that are transient in other ways that are using the bathrooms at the library and things like that. And I actually am just curious, it's not exactly related to making, although I will say I have heard some really amazing stories of individuals that have been homeless and have used the tools at a particular library makerspace to actually transform their lives in a particular way. I'm just curious, how have the changes that are around COVID affected sort of the populations of people that are and B, I felt like you might have some, being that you're in LA. I didn't want to pick on you, but
no, that's okay. That's okay. I'm totally fine, because I felt really bad that I hadn't talked about it yet. Black Lives Matter. That walked right by the library, the Central Library. We got tagged that day. We're a fortress, so that's why we didn't burn down. So it's very hard to break our windows, but there has to be an intentionality with, we had mandatory training on how to de-escalate and how to interact with people experiencing homelessness. During this entire time, we had mandatory training for all staff. We've also pretty much have been celebrating Black Lives this month. I've pretty much, for me, being named after Octavia Butler means every June is Octavia Butler month, and we do it every day, every year. So her birthday's yesterday. Happy birthday, Octavia Butler. We've been very grateful for the support the estate has given the lab, and also incidentally to our partner Lacey in purchasing equipment and plastic. Thank you, the estate, for making us be able to make PPE and continue to make PPE. But for us, there's this intentionality. Like, in the future, whenever we reopen, we will be partnering actively with community partners in order to make sure that it is explicit. And we can't just say we're open for all. We're going to be explicit in who we reach out to and saying that we are open to, people of color, minorities, people of color, or transgender people, homeless. It's just, we have to be very intentional in saying, in that weird way, we have to be inclusive.
Thank you.
Hey, Dorothy, maybe it's a time for you to introduce what you're working on for the town hall.
Yeah, so actually that's a great segue. Nation of Makers in collaboration with Make Community, as well as Fab Foundation, Citizen Schools, Open Source Medical Supplies, and Tico Nalam Makers. We're actually, along with pretty much the whole community, we'll be hosting a town hall sort of conversation. It's a dialogue. It's not actually going to be run as a town hall. It's going to be really an open dialogue in our community, a conversation about race and inclusion in the maker movement. And we don't see the dialogue as the end. We see the dialogue as a start to the work that V is actually talking about. How do we create this intentional environment to actually change intentionally the way the maker movement looks? I'm very aware of, the faces on this call and the faces that are on the calls that we've had, and who's not at the table, right? And I think actually Sasha was on the other call in Chicago where, Jackie Moore spoke to that and just sort of said, there's a lot of people that aren't at the table, and that changes how we do things, that changes the problems that are solved. And I think, it's about time for everybody, right? But it's about time for the maker movement, and that's really our sphere of influence. So Nation of Makers and Make and the other partners are really excited to have this conversation. It will be July 2nd from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be sending out some more information about registration and things like that soon, but we're really excited to have that dialogue, and as I said, to have it be the beginning of the work that we intend to intentionally do with all of you and everyone else that's on this call and everyone else in our community, to really move forward intentionally to create not just spaces for individuals of color, but, and not just having people open, saying we're open to everybody, but really thinking about how we can co-create spaces and organizations that are equitable, that celebrate the contributions of the entire maker community, and that are responsive to the community needs of people of color as much as we are to the needs of people that are of the majority. So I think, although soon we'll be the majority minority, but anyway, that's a whole other discussion. But anyway, we're really excited about this work, and we know it's going to be hard, but we're all going to do it together. And I am an eternal optimist, so I do feel very hopeful that we can make significant inroads and changes. So I'm excited for all of you to join us. V, I definitely will be looking towards you and the work that you're doing in LA, if you want. Certainly you don't have to. But anyone else who wants to be engaged with this work, we're happy to have you. And we'll start out with that conversation on July 2nd, again, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern. And we'll have the information out to everyone broadly really soon.
Yeah, thank you, Dorothy. I just, I feel like librarians sometimes are a little quiet in the maker community, but that the work that you're doing and the leadership that you have and your view of this entire community is something that I hope we can learn from you more and hear from you more about how to solve for inviting everyone intentionally to participate in makerspaces, and to to see this as a public service, as a community service, not just as something that helps some people. So anyway, I particularly we've gotten into some of that today, but I encourage you to share just some of the documents that V put up here, and others. Yes, there's details and guidelines around reopening and how to do virtual programs, but to some degree, the equity of how do we reach everyone and how do we really get them engaged on their terms is something that I think we all have to learn how to do better. So any final thoughts about each of you, just about where you're looking forward to, what you're working on, that's perhaps not just COVID-19, but maybe beyond COVID-19. Hey, Martin?
Yeah, so I just wanted to encourage everyone, if you have, any kind of city government, which most of us do, they often have licensing that they use for city staff. So if you haven't been able to get, in terms of content creation, we were able to get an Adobe license. For our makerspace, we actually got city licenses for free to use in that for content creation, not only in the makerspace, but even here at home. And then they also purchased video editing software so that we could create those videos for our patrons. So if you haven't asked your city government for what licenses they have, definitely do so. It's definitely been very helpful for us in terms of putting that out there. And then again, planning the future, hosting podcasts, creating more team programming, it's definitely helpful. And so if you haven't, definitely ask.
Yeah, feel free to share that with us at Make Community, whether we can distribute that through Maker Camp, or if any of you want to host something like an episode on Maker Camp, we'd love to work with you on that. But I'd love to see some of the content and the videos that you are producing. That would be very interesting. Thank you, Martin.
Martin, I have
Sasha?
to challenge you on that. It's great to have the licensed stuff to show people what people are using like in the industry. But the thing I want to communicate better to people is like what open source is, where you can find it safely. And, maybe at some point they can contribute to it. But I mean, just really taking that and like kind of running with it. I mean, that's mostly what I use at home. I'm not on Linux right now, but the other stuff is. Right.
Thank you, Sasha. That's a great point. Rebecca.
I think one of the things that, while this has all been really hard, and I know we'd all like to have not had to go through this, we've talked a lot, both in our leadership groups and with my individual team in creative services, about thinking about this as a challenge and how we can rise to it and innovate and figure out new ways of doing things. Some of these virtual programs are so popular. I don't think we're ever going to not offer virtual programs in the future. I think it's important to have a balance of both so that we can serve everyone, but it's just making things so much more accessible. And that's what libraries are all about. And so figuring all of this out, while it hasn't always been fun, has definitely been exciting when we've experienced those successes.
Okay, great. Amelia, do you have any things to share us about Vallejo?
Well, I don't know what it's gonna look like when we do reopen, and I think we're gonna continue doing kits and through the fall, and keep sharing through our virtual programs. Virtual programs have been hit and miss here, but the cooking programs we've done have been the people really like, so we'll probably continue with those. And I don't know, we'll see where it goes. But as of right now, we have all things canceled through 2020. So
Wow. Right.
There it goes.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Amelia. Just to point out, V shared the Octavia Butler coloring sheets, and everyone seems to enjoy those. I'll take a look at them myself. Thank you. Adam, any thoughts in Baton Rouge, particularly? I'd love to hear from sort of you and Jeff, sort of different parts of the country that what's going on. What do you think you'll be doing?
We're just looking forward to actually opening our flagship space at whatever capacity the new normal is, since our libraries are open, but our spaces are not there just yet, and probably continuing the kind of grab and go stuff that we've been doing. And hopefully you guys are giving me some ideas for some virtual programs that we can do, so maybe we can do a little bit more of that. Yeah, too.
Great. All right. Thanks, Jeff.
I mean, I guess I'd second a lot of what people are saying. I loved to, we had a building that we were going to move our makerspace to and actually outfit, but that kind of is now on back because I don't often we're actually going to be able to have in-house programming with everybody, safely able to do that. So we're going to continue to concentrate on where I think the need is at in our community, and that's our educators, and how do they not revert back to pencil and paper type of learning, but how do they utilize what they've learned, but in this new environment, because I don't think they've really been trained for that. So that's kind of where our focus is going to go towards the summer and fall, I think.
That's great. Sasha, you make a really good point. You know, in some ways, this has forced many people inside of institutions to get up to speed on Zoom or, you know, other ways of doing things. And while it has been somewhat optional for people to learn these things, now it's kind of essential. And you know, it was one of the things I was kind of proud of in doing Virtually Maker Faire is that we didn't produce it. People had to produce their own sessions. And it, you know, maybe it wasn't as high quality as it might have been, but it actually gave people the experience of hosting their own session. And really, what we're doing here is something that can be done by anybody and should be done by lots of people. So, Ashley, any final thoughts from you?
I was going to say, Sasha, you talked about open source. If there's anybody out there who wants to do kind of like streaming style videos and you want to add a little pizzazz, OBS, which is, I had to look it up, open broadcaster software, is totally free, really well documented, and a delightful little tool that we are using on our end.
Yeah, that's great.
But yeah, I think I'm looking forward to just getting to see people again and to start doing repair events again. I think that's going to be a big need.
Well, and I think everyone's has all this stuff that, like I was saying to someone else, it's like I have all this stuff that needs to be like taken care of, like fixed and donated, and like I have all these piles of things. So I'm excited, you know, for the world to open so that you could actually do those things that you enjoy doing.
Yeah, we did a session a week ago on repair cafes, virtual repair cafes, virtual fix-it clinics. You know, I think one of the positive things, it sort of relates to libraries in a way, is it's sort of a rediscovery of DIY, of fix-it, of doing things yourself, figuring out how to do it. And I always thought the library was, you know, is just chock full of books and resources for those people. You know, we can find a lot of stuff online, but there's some really wonderful arts and crafts books, all kinds of things there to explore. Cooking, it doesn't all have to be the latest book to explore some of these areas, the traditions behind them as well. So, well, thank you all for being a part of the program. Thank you, Dorothy, for joining me.
One more thing, I just want
sure.
put a plug in. So for all the librarians that are either listening in or on this call now, Nation of Makers does have a really, really active and large library working group that's very, very active, and people share best practices. If anyone wants to be put on our Slack, you can send me a message or actually you can send a message to info@nationofmakers.us, and our assistant will make sure you get onto the Slack and get into that libraries working group. But it's a great bunch of people. I love the libraries. I am a little biased there because I had such fond memories growing up in a library. So definitely appreciate everything that you guys are doing, and so grateful that you joined us today. And any way that we can all support you, that would be amazing. So keep doing the wonderful.
Amelia mentioned that homesteading books are popular in our library. So I think I said to someone, this is a new homesteading age. People are spending more time at home and they're figuring out how to do things. My brother has a furniture company, so people are buying dining room tables because they're eating at home. So any rate, thank you all for being here, and appreciate all that you're doing to get us through now and to the summer. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Take care.